friends, a mother wrote us that she was teaching her children catechism, and she asked one of her children the difference between a mortal and a venial sin. And the little girl said, a mortal sin makes God angry, and a venial sin makes him nervous. Many people today do not really understand our times because they're too close to them. They are immersed in a succession of events and judging today by yesterday and tomorrow by today. When the hand is too close to the eye, cannot see the horizon. When we're too close to events, we cannot understand them. Our blessed Lord said that would always be true. One day he said to the Pharisees, in the evening when the sky is red, you say tomorrow will be fair. And in the morning when the sky is red and lowering, you say the weather will be foul. How is it that you are able to discern the skies and cannot understand the signs of the times? Do we understand the signs of our times? What do they portend? To know, we have to have a standard. You set your watch by something outside of yourself, and outside of the watch, you do not say, now, this is my idea of time. So there ought to be some outside standard. And the outside standard is God's way of judging things. And I wonder what he thinks of our times. I think he would weep at our times. He wept 3 times in his life. Once at the death of a friend, Lazarus, when he saw the dissolution of a body, the penalty of sin. He wept once again for the death of souls in the Garden of Gethsemane, when the blood began to pour from his body, and each drop fell like a crimson bead, forming a rosary of redemption about the olive roots of Gethsemane. And the 3rd time he wept was over a civilization. Maybe our times, they would draw tears from the eyes of the God-man. And when, as the great patriot, he wept over a civilization, he said that there were 3 moments in every nation's history. There are 3 moments in every civilization. The first is a moment of grace and a moment of blessing. The second is a moment of blindness. And the third is a moment of judgment. First of all, a moment of grace and blessing. Our country has had that. And our great founder, Washington, and Lincoln, who said that we have been blessed as no other country in the world has ever been blessed. And we have been blessed too in our Constitution, which none of us want to change. A time of blessing for every country, as he said, he called it the time of visitation. And he said there was the time of blindness, when these things are hidden from your eyes. And the time of judgment, when enemies will come. There will not be left a stone upon a stone. As I said, we have had our moment of blessing. But we have also had our moment of blindness, our national blindness. And when was it? In World War II. There were 3 wicked and evil philosophies in the world: communism, Nazism and fascism. The only difference between the three was the difference between murder, killing, and taking a life. But in our moment of blindness, we said only two of these are evil. One is good. And we called it a democracy. How the Jews who know the Old Testament could have told us that we were wrong. For the Jews had heard their prophet Ezekiel say, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt, trusting in horsemen because they are many, and in horses because they are strong." These people who knew their scriptures in those evil days could have said, "Woe to those that go down to Russia for help, trusting in Cossacks because they are many, and in tanks because they are strong." It was a time of blindness, where we flew in the face of the wisdom of our divine Lord, who said, "You cannot drive out the devil with Beelzebub." I was not allowed to say that line on the radio during the war. It would have been offensive to Russia. Remember, our Lord told the story of a soul that he compared to an empty house. The devil was driven out, and then the devil got 7 other devils worse than the first. They came in and dwelt in the house. The last state of the man was worse than the first. And that is what we have done. We have driven out the devil of Nazism, the devil of fascism. But 7 other devils worse than the first came back. And now communism owns 37 out of 100 people in the world. This was the day of our blindness. No, there were many who saw it in the 19th century. Even atheists saw it. An atheist like Nietzsche, who said, "I announce a tragic era of the 20th century, an era of convulsions and wars, when my atheism will produce a nihilism." Cournot, the famous French scientist, said in the 20th century, man will invent something that will bring his own destruction. Remember, the Holy Father Pius XII addressed the Pontifical Academy of Science 2 years before the atomic bomb exploded over Hiroshima. He gave the exact explosive power of an atomic bomb, and then asked the nations that it never be used destructively, and he said if it ever is used destructively, it will bring great harm in those places where it is used, and eventually to the planet itself. It makes one think of the words of Jean Cour, the French publisher. At the end of the 19th century, Jean Cour was visited by 2 distinguished scientists of France, Claude Bernard and René Berthelot. These men explained some of the destructive power of chemistry. And then they said to the publisher, "We have just begun to lisp the alphabet of destruction." And the French publisher said, and he said that when that day of destruction comes, I think that Almighty God will come down from the heavens like a night watchman rattling his keys, and he will say to the world, "Gentlemen, it's closing time." then we will have to start all over again. Judgment, blindness, but now particularly judgment. And when we speak of judgment, we do not mean that God strikes us in wrath. God does not punish us as much as we punish ourselves. For example, if I do not eat, I disobey a law of nature. I suffer as a result a headache. The headache is a judgment upon my disobedience of that law of nature, which is eventually the law of God. Now we disobey moral laws, we produce certain effects. These effects, catastrophic effects, are called the judgments of God. We are now under judgment because of our blindness. This is the nature of the judgment. Man was meant to go upward to God. Instead of going upward to God, man has gone down to matter. First of all, our modern psychology says that man is only a beast. Secondly, we've repudiated all the great Christian heritage. It reminds one of the day that an artist went, or rather a visitor went into the Louvre, France, and he saw all of the great masterpieces of the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th century. And on his way out, he said to the guard, "I don't see anything in here to admire. There's nothing worth looking at." And the guard said, "Listen, these pictures are not on trial. You are." And when we repudiated the Christian tradition, Christianity was not on trial, we were. We identified man with the beast, and then finally we identified man with matter himself, in the sense that there were many who gave the spirit and temper to civilization who said, after all, the only values in the world are material, security, and getting all you possibly can. Now it happens that when a man goes down to something that is beneath him, that thing will often turn against him in revolt. For example, a man becomes an alcoholic. He was meant to master alcohol, but he goes down, submerges, loses himself in alcohol. Alcohol practically says to him, "You were meant to be my master. You have ceased to be my master, and now I shall hate you. I shall turn against you." And now if our modern civilization, not only America, has a benign materialism, the materialism of Russia, if in that materialism man has gone down to matter, then what do you think would be the nature of judgment? The nature of our judgment could be something like this. Matter might turn against us. And what part of matter? Oh, the lowest thing that there is in matter. The primate of all of the chemicals, namely an atom of hydrogen, might turn against us and become a bomb. And what would it do to us? Why, it would do the same sort of thing that we have done to our own minds. We fissioned our minds. We called it psychoanalysis. Instead of using on synthesis to bring our minds to unity, to bring them to God, we've torn them down, reduced ourselves to the beast, to ids, to libidos, and to subliminal urgings that equate us with the animals of the fields. If then we efficient our mind, maybe this primal thing in all nature might turn against us, revolt against us. And that would be the thing that we fear. That would be judgment. And so many say today, they ask the question, must we die? What a foolish question that is. Must we die? Are we beasts? Is there no other power that we know except the power of atomic fission? Have we forgotten the omnipotent power of God? More than that, there's nothing to fear about an hydrogen bomb or any other kind of atomic bomb. God lights the sun with atomic energy. An atomic bomb, atomic energy is just as harmless as a match. I give any of you a match, you're not fearful of it. Suppose I give a match to an arsonist. You're afraid. Therefore, there's nothing to worry about atomic energy. We have to worry about atomic men. That's our worry. And who are atomic men? Atomic men are those who identify themselves solely with this world, who think there's nothing else. And then they discover that the world's rewards are not equal to the world's pains. Then they feel they've been cheated, just as a man would hate a woman because she has not given to him all the pleasure that he thought and all the heaven that she promised. And as he may turn against that woman, so too these men who find that the world has betrayed them in loyalty to God and has not given them rewards equal to their pains, they are the kind of men that would want to revolt and destroy it. Those are the atomic men. It's not atomic energy we have to fear, not hydrogen, a gift of God. Why do we ask, must we die? As if we were quadrupeds. There's another question that we ought to ask ourselves. And that question is, must we be reborn? That's the problem. Must we change? Change our home life, our domestic life. Change the way we educate our children so that they may be brought up in fear of God and love of their parents. If we ask ourselves, must we be reborn, we will see and understand that we are guilty. And what we have to fear is not Russia, but our own guilt. And everyone in the world is guilty. Everyone. Ourselves as well as Russia. And if we face that guilt before God, then we will begin to have a rebirth of freedom in this great country of ours and in the world. No one wants Russia destroyed. No one wants America destroyed. There are too many good people in Russia and too many good people in America. Therefore, let us face the truth that we are just defending in Western civilization a half-truth against a lie. A half-truth. We in America are insisting solely on liberty, and a liberty that does not recognize the law. They are insisting on a law without a liberty. We are insisting on rights without duties, and they are insisting on duties without rights. And therefore we both need to be changed before God. And if therefore there is sin and guilt that we have to face, well then, to whom shall we look? It might be well for us possibly to go back and look at a great battle that took place between the master man of mind of evil, Goliath, and that great Jewish shepherd boy who later on became a king, David. The giant Goliath was panoplied in armor from head to foot. And King Saul, the king of the Jews, put his armor upon David to go out to meet Goliath. And David took it off. He could not walk in it. He said, no, I shall go forth to meet Goliath in the name of the Lord of hosts. And he went to a tree. And he took from out a tree a crotch. And he made out of it a slingshot. And then he went to a brook. And he picked up from the brook 5 stones. And armed with that crossbar of wood and those 5 stones, he went out to meet Goliath. And Goliath sneered at him and said, whom do you think I am? A dog? That thou shouldst so come to do battle with me? And David shot a stone and hit the only unprotected part of the body of Goliath, his forehead. And Goliath fell dead. America cannot thrust aside its armor, its armament, as David did. Because nations have no immortality, persons have. Nations must defend themselves. But American can learn not to trust in that armament and not to trust alone in those bombs. And all America can learn, too, to understand that David was merely a prefigurement of someone else. The evil of Goliath is the evil of Satan, the evil of the world, the evil that brings on wars and hates and divorces. David prefigured our divine Savior, who met the forces of evil with a tree and its crossbars that look like that slingshot of David. And then he took not 5 stones from a rippling brook, but 5 wounds from rippling rivers of blood that looked like precious stones. And with these he conquered Goliath. So let America trust in its stars and stripes, but also realize that America will conquer also by other stars and other stripes, namely by the stars and the stripes of Christ, by whose stars we are illumined, and by whose stripes we are healed. And we pray too to that mother who stood at the foot of the cross, whom the divine Savior said would conquer the serpent of evil. To her my life was dedicated and consecrated as a babe. To her I have dedicated all of these telecasts and all of my life. To her I dedicate America and pray to her, let not America be inhabited by God only in ruins. Lift up thy gates, America. Open thy soul. Be strong and be strong.
People of all faiths recognize Bishop Fulton.j.sheen as one of the greatest communicators of the 20th century. He was born in El Paso, Illinois, in May of 1896. As a young boy, he knew he wanted to be a priest. He served as an altar boy at St. Mary's Cathedral in Peoria, Illinois. At St. Viator College, his education and debating skills taught him the skills he used throughout his life. His unique ability at being natural and at ease in front of any audience was noted early in his ministry. He was ordained in 1919 and went on to become one of the best-known and greatly loved priests in church history.
Friends, in a certain city, a politician was running for office, and he advertised for volunteer workers. There were so many young women appeared for the job as volunteers that there was a near riot. Were they interested in politics? No. The first question they asked was, how many men have appeared? They were part of the lonely young women of this great city. And then I know of an old woman who stays up every night until 12 o'clock to hear the announcer say, we are now signing off, good night, and have a good sleep. That relieves her of her loneliness. There was really and truly, a woman wrote to me and told me that my program was the only one to which her cat ever listened. So our subject tonight has to do, to some extent, with loneliness. It affects all ages. Children are lonely. 5 million of them belong to divorced parents in this country. Boys get lonely. That's why they join gangs. because they get power which they do not individually have. Young girls are lonely when they get a pimple on the nose. Older girls are more lonely still when the boy treats them as a glass, throws the glass aside after he has taken the drink. They find then that they're just a replaceable part in the great erotic IBM machine. Their loneliness increases. Then there's the loneliness of leadership, being the top man on the totem pole. There's the loneliness of being at the bottom of the totem pole, because you're just one of the masses. You're apt to lose your personality. The loneliness sometimes of marriage, where all the jokes have been told. There's no new event to narrate. And it's the terrible solitude of being alone together. And then even when it does remain fine and noble and rich, even in moments of greatest unity, there is a feeling of apartness after such an ecstasy. One hopes to completely submerge oneself, and yet one finds oneself back again. The hypochondriacs, of course, are lonely. And so we were asked to talk on this program about this subject of loneliness. And I'm going to give, after these facts, which we have just narrated, I'm going to give first the causes, and then I'm going to suggest some remedies. Now, I didn't know whether to use the blackboard or not. My angel is here, and I cannot think of any diagram that I could use. Just write causes on the board. So I'm afraid I will not be able to use my angel, but just before I came on the program, he wanted to know if I would play a game of golf with him tomorrow. And I told him that I was not old enough for golf because I play tennis twice a week. When I get old, I am going to play golf, and I'm going to have a wagon, too, to take me around from hole to hole. And, but he was telling me that the other day he was playing golf, and he drove off 225-yard hole it was, and the ball went right into the cup. And he looked up to heaven and he said, "Dear Lord, let me do this by myself." He's not a lonely angel, as you see. Now, what are the causes of loneliness? Well, one of the causes of loneliness has to do, first of all, with the lonely people themselves. And another reason why they are lonely is because of people who are not lonely. First of all, on account of the lonely themselves. They want to be loved too much. They want to love, to be loved. Now, there's nothing wrong about wanting to be loved, because we're all Stradivarius violins without bows. I didn't mean that pun. We are... one of the difficulties of an unprepared, unscripted play. And we're cups without saucers. We are to be complimented. But the deep loneliness of which we are speaking comes from an excessive desire to be loved. The more I want to be loved, the less I am loved. The less I'm loved, the less lovable I become. The less lovable I become, the less I'm capable of loving others. And that's how, by a desire to seek only oneself and to please oneself, one gets caught like a bird in a fowler's net. And the more one struggles to get out of this loneliness, the more one is captured by it. Just take some concrete examples of this desire to be loved. I know of a mother whose daughter was away at college. And she used to call up the daughter every night. Would keep the daughter on the phone for an hour and protested to the daughter that she was not appreciated as she should be. And because other girls in this college wanted to use the phone, she said to her mother, "Mother, I'm forbidden to use the phone anymore." One day, the superintendent had sent for her, and she was unable to answer the phone, and she told her mother, "Send someone to answer the phone for her." The mother said, "This is the end," and she refused to see her daughter again. Thus, by wanting too much to be loved without loving, one loses even the love that one seeks. And then there was a fiancée. She used to. I wonder if any of you young women in the audience ever do that. Do you know what she would do? She would write down in a book every time the boyfriend called how long he spoke. She also wrote down how often he wrote and how many words he wrote in each letter. She felt that she wasn't loved enough, so she began writing herself anonymous letters, threatening her. And she said that these letters came from a well-known author in the city. And finally, she was exposed by this man whom she blamed, and eventually the marriage was broken off. She just loved too much, loved to be loved. And then there was the wife who felt that her husband was paying no attention to her, insisted that he stay away from work. She wanted to go to a picnic, wanted to go to the beach, and he found excuses many times, and finally he lost his job. The marriage broke up. So one of the principal reasons of loneliness, therefore, is this egotism which seeks only oneself. And you can already see the cure anticipated by the mere fact that we mention this cause. But then there's another cause of loneliness, and that's on the part of the people who are not lonely. They do not bring any love to these people. Do you know what we should do? We should really concentrate a great deal on certain types of people. We should concentrate on the unfortunate, on the poor, on the socially disinherited, on the unloved, particularly the unloved, and on the ugly. And we bring love to them. We put love into them. Then they become lovable. Now, for example, you are very lovable to God. Did you know that? You say, well, what is there in me to love? Nothing. But he put his love into you. That's why you're lovable. And that's what we have to do with other people. And so the loneliness of these people is increased also because the rest of us will not listen to them. Listening is a therapeutic. There was a psychologist who formulated a marriage case that involved sexual, financial, social, and legal complications. He went to 100 clergymen and 100 priests to present the story, and he carried a stopwatch with him. Do you know how long they listened? The average was 2.5 minutes. Then off-the-cuff answer. They refused to listen. They refused to care. George Bernard Shaw has something rather good on that subject. In his play St. Joan, King Charles says to Joan, "Why do not the voices come to me? I am the king." And Joan answers, "They do come to you, but you do not hear them. You have not sat in the field in the evening listening for them. If you prayed from the bottom of your heart and listened to the thrilling of the bells and the trilling of them after they had stopped ringing, you would hear the voices, just as I do." In other words, listening is a therapeutic, a cure for lonely people. We do the same thing with our prayers. We wouldn't do to a doctor what we do to God. Would we go into a doctor and mumble off all of our symptoms and then say, "Bye, doctor"? Not listen. So listening on our part, refusal to listen, is one of the causes that intensifies this forsakenness. Now, what is a cure? Well, there are several cures, and we will just have time to mention one that is very important, namely caring for other people. When we're lonely, go out and serve. Then loneliness goes out through our fingertips. Our heart opens. The Chinese have a proverb, if you're without shoes, go out and find a man without any feet. Caring for others. I remember when I first went to Europe to study, to do my university work as a young priest. The first Christmas I was lonely. I was really lonesome. I think it was the only time in my life I was lonesome. What would I do? So I went to someone in the city of Louvain and asked for a list of the worthy poor, and I went to this particular alley. It was the wrong address, actually. I got into Rat Alley. When the door opened, there, earthen floor, was a blind father at a stove. 10 children barefooted around the stove. A ladder leading up to the second floor. One bed upstairs, bed downstairs. The children slept crosswise. I asked the family what they had. This was Christmas Eve, what they had for